It's that time of the year. No, sorry, not Christmas or the holiday season. It's Super Bowl time. Who do you guys got? The Bucks or the Chiefs? Brady versus Patrick Mahomes? Find out in the next episode of Sideline Sports Podcast. Welcome to Sideline Sports Podcast. If you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. It's the beginning of February, and everybody knows it. It's Super Bowl time. We've got a great matchup, but before we get there, I'm Alex Naveja from Sideline Sports Podcast, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, source of all of your SoCal sports news. We're not talking about SoCal sports news, but the gentleman right next to me, a good friend of mine, colleague of mine, Nathan Percy from the SoCal News Group, and also we know each other from high school baseball, doing some play-by-play, but he's from Orange Lutheran High School, very familiar with that baseball program, but none other. Nathan, how you doing today? Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely, Alex. Thanks for having me. Doing well, hanging in there. Hopefully you are as well, and as this pandemic continues, but we're very blessed in good health, and hopefully it's the same with you and your family.
Thank you, Nathan. Hoping everything is safe with you and your family as well. Hopefully you're enjoying all the reporting that you've been doing. We were talking about it before. You're working, you're grinding, a lot going on. Before we get on with this episode with the Super Bowl, if you guys have any questions that you would like for me or for any future guests to answer, please comment down below. I'd love to get to all of your questions and be able to answer them throughout any episodes and future episodes as well. So you know what? Let's get started with it. Nathan, what a hot game that's going to be coming up. No matter, we haven't even seen it, and I know it's going to be a good one already. We're talking about the GOATs fighting for ring number 7. He already has the hardware in one hand. He's trying to fight for that second one right here.
Yep.
So
lucky number 7.
Number 7 compared to the soon-to-be GOAT who just won it last year is trying to make it 2 straight, just like Tom Brady has done in the past. What are your thoughts on this matchup on these two teams?
Oh, man, where to begin? Like you said, first of all, obviously it starts with the quarterbacks. It's kind of a proverbial passing of the torch, if you will. You have Tom Brady, who's been doing it for the better part of 2 decades, and you have Patrick Mahomes, kind of a once-in-a-generation talent who shows he doesn't get rattled by pressure, and he comes from a good background. His parents were both athletes, and so he knows how to perform at this level. And again, I think if this was Mahomes' first Super Bowl, then we could easily say, well, Tom Brady's got the experience factor locked in, whereas Patrick Mahomes might come out and play a little bit rigid or be a little nervous. But Mahomes was just there last year, so both of these guys are used to it. They know and understand and love the pressure. It's going to be a great duel between 2 quarterbacks, but there's a lot more that goes into it than that position itself. Both of these teams have good defenses. The weapons surrounding both of these quarterbacks are elite on both sides. It's really hard. I think this is probably the hardest it's been in some time to predict who's going to win the game come this Sunday.
Yeah, this is a pretty tough one to really even pick out. Which one are you going to take? A lot of people want Brady to win so he can get that 7th ring. Some people are even rooting for Patrick Mahomes, of course, being the Tom Brady haters in there. But another thing that I really was looking into, Brady with experience, and then you look at Mahomes with experience, as you mentioned before, Ed Reed also with experience, but then you look at the other side, Bruce Arians. He doesn't have any Super Bowl experience. So does that Ed Reed experience really outweigh Bruce Arians not having anything? It just goes back to that Patriots-Rams Super Bowl, how Bill Belichick absolutely outcoached Sean McVay in there. Do we see that happening again?
I don't know. I don't know that I would say as much about that. Andy Reid is, obviously he's been a head coach for a long time, and you see he's had so much success with the Eagles. He took them to a Super Bowl, and then obviously now with the Chiefs. I mean, he's been a great offensive mind for a long time. Bruce Arians, if I recall correctly, was an offensive coordinator in a Super Bowl win with the Steelers, but he hasn't won one as a head coach. Um, and I mean, you see stories that have come out recently where, Bruce Arians is like, hey, you know what? I mean, I just let Tom Brady kind of, do his thing. He does some of the coaching, but obviously Tom Brady has a hand in it as well. And rightfully so. I mean, he's been there, done that so many times. And again, you see, at the start of the season, they struggled a little bit in terms of, their cohesion, their team chemistry. But as the season has gone along, you've seen that they've, improved leaps and bounds into a team that we normally see with Tom Brady as the quarterback. But in terms of the coaching matchup, Andy Reid probably does have the advantage there because, again, he's got a little bit more experience as a head coach. He's made a name for himself there, and he's done it for so long. But I wouldn't count Bruce Arians out in that regard. He's a great offensive mind, and he's got perhaps the best weapon in the game in Tom Brady, who is basically a second coach offensively on the field.
How about the receiving core for both of these teams as well? You look at the Bucks. They have Godwin. They also have Antonio Brown through some pretty good duos there. And then you look at the Chiefs, and they have Hill, and they also have Travis Kelce. So when looking at these two teams, who do you think has an upper advantage?
Oh man, if I had to pick one, I would say maybe just the slightest of slight advantages to the Bucks because they have more, big name talent. Obviously, adding Antonio Brown midway through the season, it was kind of interesting to see, how that would play out for them at first. When they first signed him, I thought, how are they going to spread the ball around? How are they going to make everybody happy there? But somehow Tom Brady has made it work. You mentioned Godwin. They also have Mike Evans, who is the only receiver in NFL history to have more than 1,000 yards receiving in his first 7 seasons. You can't count him out. He's going to be a big factor in the game as well. And then, of course, you have Gronkowski, who hasn't had as big of a role this year offensively, but in recent weeks, he started to come up with some pretty big plays too. So I would give them a slight advantage, and that's only because they have a couple more big-name receivers than the Chiefs do. Obviously, Tyreek Hill has a way of finding space in the field like nobody else can, and he's got the speed to burn as well. And then, of course, Travis Kelce, is the new best tight end in the game. I mean, he was close to leading the league in receiving yards each of the last 2 years, and I think he set a record for most receiving yards for a tight end this season as well. And then when you look at the rest of the receivers, they've got Sammy Watkins, who's a good veteran. They've got McCole Hardman, who's had a couple of big catches in recent weeks. You can't count those guys either. But yeah, like I said, if I were to give an advantage to either side, it would be a very, very slight advantage to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I'm going to have to agree with you on that. I think the Bucks definitely do have that advantage with that receiving core itself. Brady always seems to have an eye on finding the open receiver. And then, of course, you can never beat that chemistry that Brady and Gronk have. I mean, since Patriots days, it's just one of those third down, expect Brady to go with Gronk because he's always looking for that first down. And if it's not to Gronk is going to buy more time for Brady in the pocket, always giving him a little pass protection. And maybe could go with Antonio Brown. But in the same time, can't count out Mahomes and him going to his tight end with Travis Kelce. That guy's just a first down monster and just making things happen, not just in the pocket, but just the way he scrambles and the way he moves and how he's so mobile, which leads me to my next question. How do you think what do you think you would have to do to stop Brady and Mahomes?
Oh man. Well, for Brady, I mean, obviously, I think it starts with making him uncomfortable, getting a good pass rush. I think the Chiefs, obviously, you hear a lot about Chris Jones being able to cause disruptions in the backfield, and they've got a pretty good defensive line, a pretty good front seven that can cause some disruptions. It's just a matter of if they can get past that offensive line and really disrupt Brady. For Mahomes, it's I mean, he's so good with improvisation, and obviously he's got speed to burn. If he gets out of the pocket and finds a hole, he can run downfield as well. And then when you think you got him, he unleashes a sidearm throw or a no-look pass or something like that. Um, it's really hard to figure out a way to stop Mahomes because he's so versatile and he's so good, kind of thinking on the fly. I guess they call that, going off script. When the play kind of breaks down and he has to find something, he can extend plays really well. I mean, I'm definitely not an expert with this, but if I were to say anything, I mean, the pass rushers on the edge, if they can find a way to keep him in the pocket, obviously with good help from the secondary covering up those receivers, if the defensive ends can keep him in the pocket and give time for the rest of that front seven to get in there and get to him, I think that might be the best way. But other than that, I mean, I can't really think of anything else aside from the secondary's just got to be airtight on those receivers and not give them anywhere to throw the ball.
I have to agree with you also. I say to stop Brady, I really think it goes down to that D line for the Chiefs. They have to get to Brady, put a lot of the pressure on him, and enforce those picks, just like Green Bay did with those 3 straight picks that they had in 3 straight possessions. I think they're going to have to put a lot of pressure on Brady, make him enforce those poorly contested throws, just have to put the pressure on him. He's not a mobile quarterback, never has been in his career, so we probably won't see him be getting out of the pocket. You'll probably have to be throwing the ball out of bounds a lot, so that'll be a lot of downs being wasted. As far as Mahomes is concerned, I mean, you said it just right. There's no way of really stopping it because even then when you put the pressure on him, he still has a QBR rating around 80. So that's still a pretty high, really good QBR rating. We've seen it before. He could get out of the pocket very well. He's very good with those flips, like if you were to turn double plays, just like that professional baseball background that his dad has. And just like you said, those sidearm, looking like an infielder right there. But I'm going to say this, Nathan. I think we've seen Brady do this throughout his career. It doesn't matter who his opponent is. If Brady takes his time in every possession and really tries to establish that running game, which is very much possible for the Bucks, get that clock running as much as you can throughout the game. And as long as you have a Patrick Mahomes that's sitting on the bench, I think you won't even let Mahomes even step onto the field and do anything really. Like just try to dominate in that possession, right?
Yeah, no, and that is another good point that you make there, Alex, is, obviously of the two offenses, you'd have to give Kansas City the edge in being the more explosive, dynamic offense, the offense that can score, within a couple of plays when they start the drive. When you have Mahomes, you have Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, who can both be deep threats. So, yeah, I agree. I think one of the keys for Tom Brady is just sustaining drives, really relying on that run game, which I give the Buccaneers the advantage on the run game with Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette really starting to come through, late in the year and into the playoffs. But yeah, Brady is not the kind of guy who can throw it deep every single possession. He's got to kind of mix the throws. He likes, maybe taking that one shot every now and then, but everything else is usually more short to medium throws. Obviously he's got a better understanding at all times of where they're at time wise. If it's a 2-minute drill, he's going to be throwing towards the sideline or trying to find a way to make sure that he gets the clock stopped. So from a game management perspective, Brady has the edge there. But yeah, no, excellent point there. The Kansas City Chiefs, if they find themselves down, I think they have a much better shot at getting back into it very quickly. Mahomes seems to play just as well, if not maybe even better, when he's behind in a football game. So it'll be interesting to see how this game starts out. I think will really dictate how it's going to go. If Brady can come out and sustain drives and score points like they did against the Green Bay Packers early in the NFC Championship game, obviously I think the Buccaneers have an advantage there. But if for whatever reason they're unable to find the end zone in their first couple of possessions and Kansas City's rolling, then it might be a long night for Tampa Bay.
I still wouldn't even count them out, though, Nathan. I mean, we've seen Tom Brady come back from 3, 4 possession games, and I'm going to bring it back to the Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons when they were down 25. It's never been done before, and the fact that Tom Brady brings them back in the fourth quarter, and it's just the world is just shocked by Tom Brady, which is why nothing really shocks you at this point about what Brady can do in the big stages, and which is why you can keep Brady quiet for maybe the first 3 quarters, but that fourth quarter is when you need to put it into sixth gear and make the defense step up even more, because Brady, that's his quarter. That is his moment. That's when everything goes down. You can have a boring first to third quarter, but it's that fourth one where you need to be stocked up on your drinks. You need to be stocked up on what you're going to eat, finger foods, whatever is on the menu that evening, because this is it. This is Brady's moment. This is when he will, like, you make one mistake, I just need that one, and I'll make you pay.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, when it comes to the fourth quarter, Brady has that second gear that he can kick it into. The one thing that I would say in regards to comparing the Atlanta Falcons to the Kansas City Chiefs is, the Falcons had maybe a bit more of a predictable offense. Matt Ryan's not necessarily known as being an improviser, great quarterback, and he's had a great career in Atlanta. But you pretty much you kind of know what you're going to get with him. So there really wasn't a whole lot of guesswork for the defense in order to contain them. Obviously they got kicked in the mouth in the first half of football, but they figured it out and got after it in the second half. And in order for Brady to make that comeback, his defense has got to step up and figure out a way to contain Mahomes, which brings us back to an earlier point about how do you stop him. I really think that Tampa Bay, if they're going to win, their best shot is getting out to an early lead. I'm not saying that Tom Brady can't lead them back, but given how dynamic the Chiefs' offense is, I think they'll have a harder time trying to get back into the ball game if they're down by a score or more going into the fourth quarter.
Right. I'm going to go ahead and bring back the matchup that these two teams had. It resulted in a 27-24 KC with that win. A couple of numbers to throw at you, Nathan. It was Patrick Mahomes who won as far as the yards that he had. In the passing yards, he had 462 passing yards with 3 touchdowns that day. Along with Tom Brady, he had 345 passing yards with 3 touchdowns as well. But he did throw 2 interceptions that game. And then in rushing yards, Edwards with 37 yards on 11 carries for KC. And we had Jones for Tampa Bay that came in with 66 yards on 9 carries. And then the receiving yards, Gronkowski was the one that led the way for them on 6 receptions, 106 yards. And Hill with 13 receptions, 269 yards with 3 touchdowns. Do you think it's going to be another one of these? It's going to be a bloodbath and just keeping it in a field goal to make a difference?
I think it definitely could. Absolutely. I mean, both of these teams seem to be fairly evenly matched. I can't remember what week that was when that first game took place. And there are a couple of things that immediately come to mind is one, whether Chris Godwin was in that game because he had been in and out with injuries. 2, if Antonio Brown had been on the team yet at that point. I don't know how much of a difference that would have made, but obviously the big thing here was that nobody could stop Tyreek Hill. I mean, that's those numbers obviously stand out to you and stand out to me as the defense just didn't have an answer for how to find Tyreek Hill. And again, that's the thing that he's good at is finding space in the field. When you think you've got Mahomes, somehow, some way, he finds Tyreek Hill, who is snuck into some part of the field and is all of a sudden wide open. And finds a way to make a big play and either get into the end zone or get him close. And again, if this was earlier in the season, it could have been a point where Brady and the offense were trying to still get in sync. That could be another factor as well. And if I remember correctly, I believe the game was played in Tampa Bay. Is that right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So, again, Mahomes obviously, knows that he can go down there and he can win. I have a feeling that, with Bruce Arians at the helm and obviously Tom Brady, I mean, they're both offensive minds, but even they have to know that the defense has to do something about Tyreek Hill, and some sort of adjustment is going to be made. They will be better against Tyreek Hill this time around. But if they're constantly focused on Tyreek Hill, the question is, what other Chiefs receiver or even Travis Kelce could they get free and make some big plays? So, I think the big thing here for the defense is just finding a way to limit Tyreek Hill while also keeping an eye on everybody else.
Yeah, it definitely is pretty tough. You give all the attention to Tyreek Hill, but then there's also that tight end and Travis Kelce that you also have to pay attention to. So to finish off the show, Nathan, do you have a final score, or can you give a guess on what you think look like on Sunday?
Well, I mean, I don't want to disappoint, so I will have to come up with something here. I'm guessing, but coming into this game, I mean, obviously both of these teams are really, they're in stride. The Chiefs, the last few weeks of the season, it looked like maybe they had kind of let up a little bit. They were struggling a little bit, and obviously in Week 17 they took that loss because they didn't start. They didn't have their normal starters in the ball game. But it seemed like they were coming into the playoffs with a little bit less momentum because they were still beating teams, but they weren't beating them in the way that they were earlier in the season. Obviously now after beating Buffalo in the AFC Championship game, the way that they did, it's pretty clear that they're back on track. And of course, with Andy Reid at the helm, that they're going to continue to be back on track going into the biggest game of the year. And on the other side, with Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, kind of the same thing. It just took them a little bit of time to get into the flow of things, to get that team chemistry going. New quarterback running the system. They picked up Antonio Brown. They've got the run game going pretty well, and they went into a tough place in Green Bay with tough weather and figured out a way to get it done. For this game, oh, man, I honestly think that you're right. It's going to come down to a possession or less. I still think that I'm going to give the Chiefs the advantage. Seeing Tom Brady throw 3 interceptions in the second half against Green Bay, that could have easily let the Packers get back into it. Fortunately for the Bucs, Aaron Rodgers just didn't quite have it that day, especially in the red zone. He was 2 for 9 on red zone throws in that game. So the defense buckled down within the 20-yard line, which was good for the Bucs. I don't know if you're going to have that same kind of success against the Kansas City Chiefs, who have so many ways of getting the ball into the end zone. The Buccaneers, I think, have the edge in wide receivers, in running backs. The defense, I think, is pretty similar. I think the Bucs have the better front seven, but I think the Chiefs have the better secondary. Obviously, Tyrann Mathieu is going to play a big role in this game. And then with the quarterbacks, I mean, obviously, you have the 2 best in the game. You have Tom Brady, who is 43 and still doing it, and you have Pat Mahomes, who I believe is 26 or 27, maybe even 25, somewhere in the mid-20s,
Yeah.
who is obviously, the next coming of, the greatest of all time. I'm going to go with the Chiefs in this game. I think that their offense is more explosive. I think they have more ways that they can score against you, but it's going to be a close game. I'm going to go with 38-31 the final.
So more points on the board for this coming matchup. I'm going to go ahead and go with the Chiefs also for this Super Bowl. It's not an easy decision. I'm barely coming up with a decision right now. I've been thinking about it throughout the whole entire 2 weeks, honestly. And it's so hard to make a decision, but you're absolutely right. If Brady does throw 3 picks in 3 straight possessions like that, or even just throws 3 picks in a game, expect KC to take advantage of that and to come back into the game, whether they're ahead or if they're trailing. I think I'm going to go with a 24-30 as the final for the Super Bowl for this one on Sunday. And it's going to go for the soon-to-be GOAT, KC, and soon-to-be GOAT, Patrick Mahomes. But That's all the time we have left here on Sideline Sports Podcast. We thank you all so much for tuning into this one. If you guys liked this episode, please give this episode a thumbs up. Also, hit the subscribe button down below. And I also want to hear your guys' picks for the Super Bowl, who you guys think are going to stand out. And I want to hear your guys' final. Who's your pick to win the game? Please comment down below. I want to hear all of your guys' takes on the Super Bowl there. And once again, Nathan Percy from the SoCal News Group, a reporter, and also the play-by-play broadcaster for Orange Lutheran High School Baseball. Nathan, thank you so much for coming onto the show, man. I really appreciate the insight.
Absolutely, Alex. Thanks again for having me, and good to see you. Glad you're doing well.
Same with you, Nathan. Hope to run into you in the Diamond pretty soon. Hope to have high school baseball back pretty soon also. But I'm Alex Naveja from Sideline Sports Podcast signing off. And if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, a source of all of your SoCal sports news. Also, don't forget to put the questions you guys have in the comment sections down below. I'll also make sure to put Nathan's social media handles in the description below so you guys can follow all the reporting he has and all of your Orange Lutheran baseball news. I'm signing off. Have a good one, everybody, and make sure to enjoy the Super Bowl. Take care.